All right, guys. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. Welcome to our first Facebook Live. And what would a first Facebook Live be without a nice 13-minute technical delay? So hopefully I'm going to wait around a little bit for some people to join that were in before. Yeah, I'll be answering any questions you guys may have about Mediavine or anything technical related, including things like SEO, page speed, all the other stuff you guys hear me ramble about, ads. Here's some of you guys care about ads. Let me give it a second here for a couple more people to join. All right, so the first question comes from Gloria from our Facebook group, asking SEO, what are the top 3 things to work on to rank better? First things I would work on is listening to the Theory of Content podcast by Amber and Josh. Subscribe to that every week. There's some pretty awesome feedback in there. I think the most important thing, and this is something that we have really been obsessed with since the beginning of Mediavine, is just posting it more often. We post, 20 times a day on the Hollywood Gossip. I know that's not really sustainable for a lot of our food bloggers and lifestyle bloggers that are creating actual products and not necessarily just rewriting some celebrity gossip. But if you could post more often and think beyond just, as a food blogger, don't just think about recipes being the only post content you can create. Think about more roundups, more guides, more helpful things. Same for our crafting, our parenting bloggers. Just posting more, I think, is probably one of the most important things for SEO. And then the other thing is focus on page speed. I'm sure you guys knew I was going to say that. Anything you can do to improve your site's page speed. We have a lot of resources here at Mediavine to help on our blog, and we can link you to those after this live. All right. Rachel is all ears about what we say about site speed and what Mediavine does. Oh. Where's the question in that one? Help me out here, Jenny. All right, I'm just going to talk about page speed then. So one of the most important things to focus on with page speed is really the page speed of the first screen view of when your page loads. So not focusing on how long the entire page takes to load, but how quickly that first screen view loads. That's both on mobile and desktop. The reason why that's so important is because that's the perception of a user. How quickly did your initial screen of content load? Because really what you're trying to do is make sure they don't hit back. And that's what most of those studies are that you've probably seen by Google and other people out there. So what can you do to make sure that that first screen view loads as quickly as possible? First, you want to be with a company like Mediavine that's going to lazy load all of your ads, because ads take a very long time to load, which is why we only load 1 to 2 ads on page load. Most other sites out there will load their total number of ads. Let's say they have 4 to 5 ads or 10 ads on their page. They're going to load those all at page load. And so think of it as you have, like with a traffic jam, there's only so many lanes to go through. Even though everything is asynchronous or allowing multiple things to happen at once on your page, things can get bogged down. So if let's say you only have 4 lanes of traffic, you don't want to try to send through 8 people at once, or people will end up waiting behind each other. So really what you want to do is focus on making sure as much lazy loads or is deferred on your page as possible, be able to focus on the content that's in that first screen view. And so one of the tools we recommend for doing that is Google Pagespeed Insights. And you can just search for Google Pagespeed Insights, and that tool is actually by default going to measure how quickly your first screen view loads. Oh, well then, Rachel, you already got your answer. That was an easy one. It's because we lazy load. At the end of the day, all ads programmatically are kind of served from the same buyers, the same advertisers. So whether you're with Mediavine, whether you're running AdSense yourself, or whether you're with a competitor, at the end of the day, we're all serving the same kind of ads, and those are programmatic ads. And those are generally kind of slow by default. So that's why the tricks we use are lazy loading, which again is only loading 1 to 2 ads when your page loads. And the rest load as a user is about to see them. So that's probably the biggest page speed tweak that we use. We also monitor for slow ads, and we block those. Any other questions from the group? Oh, Okay, and one of the other questions we have commonly about Google's PageSpeed Insights is why there's different scores for mobile and desktop. So it's pretty important to focus on the two different devices differently. So when it comes to mobile, it's obviously a smaller screen view, a smaller screen size. So you don't want to load the same giant images you may be loading on desktop for your users that are on smaller screens, especially with slower connections like you have on a phone, which is why we personally load different sets of ads on a mobile versus desktop page. And you should also think about the same thing when you're loading your content. You don't want to load those giant images that are going to bog down your mobile site by using your same desktop images. And there's ways to do that pretty easily in WordPress using the built-in WordPress media library. We can, again, link to some more resources after that. All right. Looks like Chris has a question on, Chris has a question on how can you be contacted for influencer opportunities here at Mediavine. So one of the things is make sure you definitely have filled out your influencer profile and your dashboard, and make sure you list your rates. If we don't see rates in there, we're going to think that you don't want sponsored work. So even if you need any help, just email in to publishers@mediavine.com. I believe there's a social blue book that can help you come up with what to charge for your posts. So make sure you definitely have rates listed. And brands you prefer to work with. And just be active in our Mediavine publisher group. Steffi, who's our director of influencer marketing, along with the rest of our marketing team, are all in that Facebook group, and they're constantly asking questions and polling the group. So just make sure you're active in there. Lindsay, you have super old content that has zero to do with what your site is about. What do you do with that content? So I know there's a popular opinion or was shared on a podcast a while back that you should delete your old content if it's no longer relevant to your site. I personally don't subscribe to that theory. I would never delete content on a post if it has nothing to do with your site, but there's still people going to it, which is generally going to be the case, whether it's from search, whether it's from links. First thing I would personally do is just remove all links to that post. So you can go through any older posts, you can remove it from archives. I personally am not the most premier WordPress expert, but I would look for ways that you can remove links to those posts. And the post actually existing isn't going to harm your site. What would harm your site is if you're linking to that post. So just make sure you remove any links to it, and it'll kind of on its own go away, and you don't have to worry about it. So another question is if influencer opportunities are for the UK and Australia or just for the US only. And man, I wish I was doing this also with Amber or Steffi right now. So typically we don't require that you live in the US, but if it's a US brand, you're going to want to primarily have US traffic. At this point, I don't think we have a ton of non-US brands, but it shouldn't be limited to only US publishers, but really just publishers that have traffic in the US. Question about our health checks from Amy. How can I improve my mobile in-content score? Teal for desktop, but not mobile. So that's pretty awesome. Congratulations on going Teal on desktop. That tends to be almost more challenging sometimes. So one of the things we always recommend, so first we have a great help guide on how to format your content. I think one of the most important things to do is hit enter more often. So the way that our in-content logic works is we try not to interrupt your content flow. So as a result, we're not going to break up a paragraph of text in order to insert an ad. So we have to wait until the end of a paragraph to be able to insert an ad. So just make sure you're hitting enter more often. There's definitely been studies done by Google and other people that show that shorter form content or shorter paragraphs are easier to read, especially on the web. So it's actually going to improve your user experience. So think about shorter 1 to 2 sentence paragraphs as often as you can. And then images. Use more images throughout your post. Images are one of the greatest things in order to add more vertical height. And you got to remember that the way that we're putting in content ads, especially with our new CBA or Coalition for Better Ads Compliant, is inserting ads only as often as we can of what the content justifies. So if you're going to run more images, that's going to create more vertical height, and therefore it's going to allow for more ads and ultimately increasing your score. So I would recommend that you hit enter more often, write longer content. Make sure if you're a recipe blogger that you make sure your recipe card is at the very end of your post as well, not putting in the middle, because a lot of people who come, especially from Pinterest, are just going to read your recipe card and then get out of there. And we don't load ads that aren't going to be seen. All right, looks like Lisa, circling back to old content. I heard you should no index the old content that isn't good or relevant. Do you feel that's a good idea? So in general, I actually just let Google decide what they want to index. I think they're pretty good at it. So I wouldn't recommend no indexing. I think that's good advice that at least they're not telling you to no follow. So no follow versus no index. The difference is no index means they don't store that in their index or pages that they can show to users that are searching. But they'll still follow the links on the page so they can get to other content. So you definitely want to make sure to do follow. No index would be okay, but there's just not really a point to no indexing the content. If Google doesn't think it's good content, they're not going to show it, and it's not going to harm you. If anything, it could probably only help you by spreading around a little more page rank or links or relevancy to your newer posts. All right, moving on to video. We got a question from Maggie. I'm questioning whether or not to do the adhesion video ads. How are they performing for people that have already implemented them on their sites? All right, so the mobile video adhesion, we definitely still consider a beta here. One of the reasons why is because I know performance isn't necessarily where everyone wants it, especially Tobias. I know there's a question from you about this one as well. But the video adhesion, it doesn't actually harm you to run it right now. So what happens if there's not a high-paying video ad? It's actually going to default back to a regular display ad. So there's not actually any harm to running the mobile adhesion, the video adhesion. And all you're actually doing is helping us create more supply. So we actually have a team of salespeople that are out there selling video more than anything here at Mediavine. And there's been a lot of people that have been loving the video adhesion, but again, it's a very new unit and exclusive to Mediavine. So it's not really everywhere on the internet. There's been other people that have made videos stick with you as you scroll, and now we have one of those on desktop as well. But in terms of showing a video adhesion like this that's in front of content or pre-roll content, it's never really been created, and it's kind of a smaller player, so it's taking a little bit more time for advertisers to fall in love with it. Our hopes are by the end of Q2 or this quarter, we're going to see a lot better fill rates on the mobile adhesion. So definitely still run it. All it takes is having one video on your site, and it will only serve if there's a high-paying ad. All right, Amy, who did bring up the sticky video. So for the new sticky videos on desktop, will we still embed the video within the post? And if so, where do we put it? Great question. So the sticky video player has a few different options, one of which is just the traditional way of embedding a video within your post, the same way you've always been able to do. And if you're going to insert that video inside of your post, there's now going to be a new option called sticky. And if you turn that on, it'll automatically stick with the user once they either click play or if it's autoplay at the top of your page. So what we actually recommend for the sticky player is to place it at the very top of your page, which is going to enable autoplay. And due to the fact it sticks with the user as they scroll, you're going to get the benefits of autoplay, which is higher impressions, and the benefits of the sticky player, which is high viewability. So you're going to get a lot of highly viewable impressions. So at the very top of your post, if you're manually placing it. And one of the other options we offer is the auto upgrade the embed, which means if it were lower in the post, we can automatically bring it to the top and turn on sticky mode and autoplay for you, which is going to give you that optimized ad performance. What do you do if you don't have video content? That's another great question. So if you don't have any existing video content, Mediavine's actually working on a library of videos that you're going to have access to. We've also partnered with a third party to help us develop videos based upon your content for you. So just give us time, and in the next few weeks, you should be hearing from us on if you don't have video content, how you can have video content, especially as we go to take the sticky player out of beta. Right? Sarah, can we put multiple videos within posts? So Absolutely, and it's very much encouraged. So our video player does support now being used multiple times within a post, different videos, that is. I know when we first launched that was a bug, but that is no longer the case. You can embed multiple different videos. You can only have one autoplay or one sticky per page, but you can definitely embed multiple click-to-play videos. That can definitely be a great experience. Oh, I see Rachel up there asked about our thoughts on a jump to recipe button. All right. Well, we're waiting. Knew that one was going to come eventually. So we at Mediavine do not love jump to recipe buttons in general. I know that a lot of people think they're better for user experience. There's been some rumors that they're better for SEO. Don't know if I subscribe to that one. It may be better for user experience. That is a different question. We could have an entire Facebook Live session on. But what I can tell you about with revenue is they're definitely going to hurt you. So here at Mediavine, we focus on highly viewable ads. That's why our CPMs are so high here. But in order to maintain that viewability, we can't allow a user to jump to the recipe and then load all those ads that were in the content above it. So what we're going to do is if we detect a user using a jump to recipe button, we're not even going to load those ads between where they click jump and where they're jumping to. And the same applies to, let's say, if they jump to your comments using the comment link at the top. We don't load all those ads in the content. Otherwise, we would have loaded 9 or 11 or whatever number of ads you have on a long form post, and no one would have seen them. And that's not really the model of the future of digital advertising. Advertisers want to pay for their ads to be seen. So even if they aren't subscribed to the old model, which is where they'll pay for any ad, not just viewable ads, the future means that they're only going to be paying for viewable ads. All right, we're going back to video, my favorite topic this year. Can I add videos to my posts that are already ranking well, or will that mess things up? So that is a good question. So I know a lot of people, when they have a high ranking post in Google, they like to not mess with things. That's definitely not a terrible idea. Obviously, no one wants to mess up a post that's ranking well. However, I can tell you by including our video, we have never seen a post go down in rankings. If anything, they only go up. So one of the things our video player does is it outputs JSON plus LD or schema.org markup to indicate to Google that our video is a video. So Google, they're getting much better at parsing images, but they're still not necessarily able to parse if a video is a video on your page. So use this thing called markup. Same thing that food bloggers are used to for marking up recipes. We use that for marking up video. So every time you're actually using the Mediavine video player inside of your post, you're giving yourself a little SEO boost. So I cannot possibly imagine there be any harm to the ranking of one of your posts by inserting a video. I would say maybe even the opposite. The only thing I'd be careful about is kind of redoing all of your content in that post. Adding to it is fine. I just wouldn't go through and delete old content. That's something in there is what Google loves, so don't mess with that. All right, question from Christine on URL structure. Is it okay to have categories in the URLs? Example, blog.com/DIY/learn how to build, or is it best not to have categories in the URLs? All right, so that is a good question. So I always like to defer to Josh, who does the theory of content podcast with Amber, on his opinions on URLs. And that is they don't mean that much. I'm going to use his example. If you look at YouTube URLs, they're absolutely terrible, yet they still rank. And Google does not treat its own properties any different. If you need to look any further, look at Amazon, who also has just awful URLs, and they still rank on things. So URL structure doesn't matter as much as people think. I get the obsession to no longer include dates so that you can reuse old posts. And sometimes it might, I don't know, that one is a whole, again, different debate. I didn't mean to raise that one up now. But in terms of having categories in URLs, I don't see that would ever be a harm. I would say, if anything, that would probably be an advantage. It is more keywords. So if you have, let's say, DIY, then you no longer have to use that term necessarily in your slug of the actual post itself, and you can use other keywords inside of your slug. All right, question on viewability from Lawrence. Mobile in-content viewability generally seems to be lower than other ad units. Is there anything I can do to improve that? Great question. So yeah, viewability in general on mobile is actually going to be lower. A lot of that is just because most users that are browsing on their phone are actually using cellular connections and not Wi-Fi. I know when we browse our own sites, we're probably at home using Wi-Fi. They load lightning fast, and that's awesome. But most of our users are on like 3G connections. As much as the world thinks we're moving to 5G already, most of us are pretty much stuck on slower internet connections, and ads take a while to load. So even with all our viewability tricks that we use to try to lazy load the ads as the user is coming to see them, viewability is always going to be a little bit lower in content and in mobile ads in general. Things you can do to improve it. One, make sure you're definitely not lazy loading your images. As I was mentioning before about those traffic jams, the same thing can happen between your images and your ads if you're lazy loading both of them. So make sure you're only lazy loading ads if you're with Mediavine, and we do that by default. And that would be just disabling any kind of lazy loading image stuff you have. Make sure instead that your images are just well optimized. Would be our preferred method for that. Other things you can do is we have an option in the advanced settings of your in-content. If you have properly formatted content, you can turn on only run ads after paragraphs or after paragraphs of text instead of running them after images. What we've seen is when a user is reading a piece of content that's text versus an image, they're going to scroll a little bit slower. And so you're more likely for a user to be able to see an ad just after a paragraph of text. The caveat with that is make sure your content is formatted correctly so that you're still getting enough in-content ads if you turn on that option. So people that are on sites like Blogger that don't necessarily format their text very readably, I would not recommend turning on that mode. And then the other thing, of course, we're always going to give you is a generic improve your page speed. Anything you can do to improve site page speed, especially on mobile, is going to allow the content to load in time so that the resources of, again, that limited internet connection can be used to download the ads instead. All right. Michelle, not even a question, but just an awesome thing to give a shout out. I'm happy I don't have a jump to recipe button. My web developer thought it was bad. We agree. Thank you, whoever your awesome web developer is. Guys, if you have any other questions, please, we're here. All right. Oh, sure would love to. Sorry, can you repeat what you said about lazy loaded images? I just started using the feature with Jetpack. So Jetpack does have that feature. So again, if you are lazy loading images, what's going to happen is your limited internet connection is going to not be able to necessarily, and we're lazy loading ads because you're here with Mediavine. Your connection can only lazy load one of those two things at once, or they're really in competition. There's really only one internet connection, right? They're both going out over the same modem or the same cellular, so they're really in competition. So we would rather you instead lazy load your ads versus your images if you only had a choice between one of the two, because ads are significantly bigger than images. So disable lazy loading images if you have it on, and instead focus on compressing images. Do we have an ETA on the recipe plugin, Amy? We don't have an exact launch date announced yet, but I can tell you we are right now mostly finished up with the recipe card itself. We're working on the importers for the various different plugins out there and kind of patching up the different themes that we're going to be offering at launch. So it's getting very close, and internally we're going to start using it on some of our own sites here at Mediavine. But as far as general release, we're still on target for June, and hopefully we can release earlier. Christine, if you were to invest money into your blogs, what would be the first thing to invest in? If you don't have video, absolutely video. Creating a video would be one of the most important things, so you can take advantage of our your video here, but the video adhesion and the sticky are will definitely pay for themselves. If you already have video on your site, thing to invest in would be Pagespeed. Absolutely, it is worth hiring a developer if you're not able to do this yourself. We know Lauren over at Once Coupled, our friends at Agathon, there's a lot of people you can hire to help you fix your page speed. And if you can afford it, maintaining your page speed as well, because it's not just a one and done kind of thing. If you can maintain your page speed, that will also pay off. So it's not just Google and SEO that loves page speed, besides your users as well. But Pinterest and Facebook have also announced that they use that in their algorithm. So increasing your page speed is going to increase your overall traffic, leading to long-term revenue that will pay for itself. Will the recipe card have an option for HTML for Blogger? Unfortunately, at this point, the recipe card is going to be a WordPress-only plugin. The way it is built, we use, for our programmers out there, we use a thing called React to build the admin in, and it would be possible for us to be able to port a lot of this stuff away from WordPress into other platforms. However, unfortunately, Blogger is pretty closed off, so we could never develop a plugin for Blogger. But the idea of creating static HTML out of it is possible. I just don't know if that's on the roadmap right now, but it's a good idea and definitely could be technically possible. All right. Tobias, how will the recipe plugin be different? Oh, and I'm getting yelled at by Amber for not mentioning the best thing to invest in, and that's hosting. Please do not use one of the cheap kind of, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but kind of the cheap reseller accounts. If you're paying less than $10 a month for hosting, it's probably not a great form of hosting, the shared hosting. You really want to be on your own kind of virtual server, which is what most of the big guys offer, just to make sure that your site doesn't go down if you have an increase in traffic. All it takes is one traffic surge for that to be worth it, and more than pay for itself. So please also invest in hosting. Give another shout out to our friends at places like Agathon, the more managed hosting, and there's other names that you guys all circulate in the groups. If you have a more managed host that's going to go in and configure your caching plugins for you and make sure your site is running optimally, that'll also definitely pay for itself, even if it has a higher price tag. Just think of the money you'll save by not having downtime and not having to spend that time on technical resources. All right, question from Tobias on the recipe card. How will the recipe plugin be different, better than something like WP Recipe Maker? All right, so one thing that we want to make very clear is that our recipe card is going to be just very opinionated and therefore different than anything else that's out there. So it's not going to necessarily be the recipe card for everyone, though we certainly would love for it to be, obviously. We're a little biased. But some things that you can really expect the recipe card to focus on that you're not really seeing out there is, one, it's going to be the most SEO optimized recipe card. In terms of JSON plus LD that we're outputting, we are going to be the only plugin that gives you the ability to hit all green lights, including getting things like multiple image aspect ratios, including all three that Google asks for. And in addition to the JSON plus LD, the word SEO friendly is thrown out a lot, but we're going to make sure that your recipes are easily reusable and you understand how to reuse them. Because one of the things that Google also loves are recipe roundups, which is another type of schema that nobody's really using. So we're going to make our recipes very reusable across your site. So you're going to not just run them once, but we're going to make sure that, as I was mentioning before, think about creating more content, and that content isn't just creating one original recipe. How can you reuse that content and show it to different users in different ways? So yeah, I think probably the biggest difference is going to be just the SEO friendliness and really the page speed. We're going to make sure that we are the fastest loading recipe card, not loading external libraries in order to do things such as render buttons. There's definitely a plugin that does that, unfortunately. So we're going to focus on page speed. We're going to make sure that it's the easiest to use recipe card. So one of the really important things that we're doing differently is we're going to allow you just to type free form how you would when you're putting in the ingredients in a text box. But on the back end, we're actually going to be converting that intelligently, be able to parse out the individual ingredients. And that's going to let us do some really cool stuff that I don't think other recipe cards out there are going to be able to do. So nutrition calculation that a few other people do, we're going to be able to offer that. But we have a lot of secret stuff coming as a result of that we can't wait to unveil. Unfortunately, we can't do that until after the card is out and some of those features are out, but a lot's coming. All right. From Kathy, will you be supporting Simple Recipe Pro import? Absolutely, yes. One of the things we're putting a lot of that time into right now, as I mentioned before, is the importers. We're starting with Easy Recipe just because that isn't really necessarily maintained as well as some of you would like. So we're making sure anything that's not maintained is getting priority to make sure we can move people off of those as quickly as possible. And things that have been sold and people aren't necessarily happy with it being sold will also get high priority. So we'll make sure around launch time, Simple Recipe Pro will be one of the ones that are able to be imported. Right, Kristen, you mentioned craft cards are coming. Will those be available when recipe cards launch or later? So one important thing we want to note is that please do not use recipe cards for craft blogging. If you use a recipe card, it is normally by default going to mark things up in JSON plus LD or schema. And if Google sees you doing that with non-food based recipes, so even if it were non-human-based food recipes, we've seen people get dinged for running dog food. Like when you make dog food yourself, homemade dog food, maybe you use a recipe for that. Google would actually ding you if you marked it up as a recipe. This is meant for only human consumption, human consumable foods. So make sure you're definitely not marking up a craft inside of a recipe card. So what we're going to do is we're going to release kind of a light version of our recipe card shortly after. Geared towards craft bloggers, so won't necessarily have, let's say, the nutrition calculation, but the ability to put materials or the ingredients that you use to create that craft, as well as the instructions, will all be, and the ability to print that, the ability to run ads in there, and so affiliate links, all coming with a craft card shortly after the recipe card, but not at the same time. All right, some questions about our conference. When is the next Mediavine conference? It's a great question. So we're looking, I'm asking Amber on this one because I'm definitely not in charge of our conference. I get in trouble if I try to push too many of these. So we're looking at spring or fall of next year. Location to still be determined, but we'll make sure in the Facebook group you guys get plenty of notifications before we announce it to the general public. So you'll be hearing from us soon. We like to plan early. All right, got another recipe card question. Will your recipe card have a separate line for the Pinterest description? So separate line for the Pinterest description is in if people press pin on it, I assume you mean it will have the different description that goes through. So Pinterest is able to do all that through what are called HTML5 data attributes. And that's what we actually use to power our hidden image pin trick that we put on the blog before. So we're going to make sure that, yes, our Pinterest pin will support kind of all of those HTML5 fields. I can't guarantee that stuff will happen at launch, but that's going to be something that we'll work on pretty quickly after if it's not, because we know that one of the biggest drivers of traffic to recipe sites is obviously Pinterest. So we want to make sure it's treated as a first-class citizen here. All right, got a question from Lisa. Any tips on reducing bounce rate? It's a great question. Shut off all of your Pinterest traffic and your bounce rate will go way down. As long as you're getting your traffic primarily from Pinterest, from Facebook, even from Google, most of your users are going to come, consume their content, and leave. That's just the nature of running a content website. Just think about how you use your own phone. If you go to browse a site, after you get what you want, you're generally not clicking around for more content. One of the things to focus on is getting returning users if you really want to improve your bounce rate. How do you get those users back to your site? Users that typically are browsing more than one page are people that come in on things like your homepage, and they're going to click around while they're looking for what they want. A user that was on Pinterest and already looked around, you're the end game there. They're not necessarily looking for something more from your site, unfortunately. So one of the things I would focus on more than anything would be returning users and things such as push notifications, where you get a user to subscribe to a push notification. Using things like the Facebook messengers or the Facebook groups to be able to get people that you can talk with and have them come back. And of course, email newsletters, as you guys know my obsession with. No matter how old they are, email newsletters still work. Get users to subscribe, get them to come back, and those are going to be your users that browse multiple pages. Trying to optimize for Pinterest users to click on another page is going to drive you nuts because that's just not what they want to do. Temery, will our recipe plugin be Gutenberg compatible? It turns out I accidentally announced this at the Mediavine conference during my talk. I did not realize that I could not just call all of WordPress 5.0 Gutenberg, but that's specifically the name for the editor. And so after I did that, Jordan and Seth, who wanted to kill me, have worked on adding in support. So yeah, we will be Gutenberg editor compatible at launch, or pretty quickly after launch if it's not. It'll be ready for you. So yes, it'll be Gutenberg compatible. Christine has a product suggestion for us, maybe a Mediavine SEO keyword tool. It's not out of the question. I think we have looked into how we can help basically bring some of these tools to you. So things like SEMrush that might be cost prohibitive that are amazing tools, trying to figure out ways that we could bring some of that power, or especially around keyword research, over to you guys in bulk. So yes, not for the very next thing, but it is coming. All right, Cheryl has a question about site health. My desktop in-content ads has a teal star and the mobile is green. How can I get my mobile to a teal star? What I do to desktop affects mobile, but mobile doesn't have a teal star. Yeah, that definitely makes sense and kind of similar to I think what we were answering before. So desktop, typically I would actually have assumed is a little bit harder to get more in-content ads on. However, we do have a lower requirement as a result, and that's probably why you're seeing teal. So it's important to know what these actual health checks are checking. And that's how many ads are showing per session in the in-content on mobile and the in-content on desktop. So mobile is definitely a little more important to run more in-content ads. Unfortunately, mobile ads pay less than that of desktop. Desktop typically pays 2 to almost 3 times as much as a mobile ad. So you really want to see, unfortunately, you want to run more ads on mobile than you do on desktop to be able to make up for that, especially since most people have about 80% mobile traffic. So what can you do to improve your mobile in-content health? So one of the things I was saying before is definitely, and I'm sure you have, Cheryl, as a longtime Mediavine publisher, but reading our help guide on how to best format your content, which again is just hitting that freaking enter key more often than you think you should. Make sure everything is formatted 1 to 2 sentences, any text paragraphs. Spread out your images and text a little more evenly. So don't run image, text, image. Run image, text, text, image, text, text. Because remember, our in-content logic is not going to break up a paragraph of text. We don't want to break your flow for you. So really, if you can focus on creating the flow around having more spots where ads can appear naturally within your post, you're more likely to get them. So basically, what the CBA logic or the Coalition for Better Ads logic is doing is it's looking to see how many ads it can insert relative to the length of your content. So if your content is 1,000 pixels, we're allowed to insert 300 pixels of ads relative to 700 pixels of content. And so that would be 1 ad in that case. So really the longer your content, the more ads will be able to get inserted. And images definitely count more towards height. So focus on just a good amount of images. Don't worry whether they're vertical or horizontal or square. Vertical is a little more important for when you're looking at the sticky health bar, health check, just because the longer your post is, the longer that second sticky ad will stay on your site. But when it comes to just number of ads we're going to insert, we actually cap how much height we're going to give an image as height when we're doing our calculation. So it won't necessarily matter whether they're vertical, horizontal, or square. Just running a decent number of images and text is going to be the best way to optimize for mobile. All right. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Sono? I'm struggling to get with Mediavine and increase my sessions. Any tips on increasing session time? So again, session time is going to be more similar to bounce rate, and actually probably a thing I'd rather people optimize for rather than bounce rate. That's how long can you keep a user on really just being on a single page is going to increase session time. But the longer the session time is not actually going to increase your number of sessions, but it will increase everything else about your site. So when you're with Mediavine, having a longer session time means users are seeing more of those ads. The sticky sidebar on desktop is with them for a longer period of time. The adhesion ads that also refresh are with them for a longer period of time. So a longer session duration is actually going to lead more towards increased revenue than pretty much anything else. So focusing on that is really just focusing on better user experience and engaging content. In terms of increasing sessions, that really comes down to, it's really the same thing as just increasing traffic. What can you do to increase traffic? Obviously focusing on things like Pinterest, Facebook, and the real traffic driver, and Google. Focusing on the big three that really lead to most people's traffic are where I would focus, and do what you can to get back more recurring users. So again, start your newsletter early. Encourage people to join a Facebook group as early as you can. Focusing on user experience, especially before you're with Mediavine, I would recommend not even running ads. That's one of the things we did with Food Fanatic, is we use that ad space that you may have used, that you may think of, to encourage people to sign up for things like the newsletter or like our Facebook page. Not that that's as relevant anymore, but using your own site to advertise for your own site is one of the things I'd recommend while you're in the growth phase. All right, more questions, guys? No, we started late, so we can also end a little bit late if we have some more. We had a question that came in from social media. Where can you meet us? It's a great question. Where's my Amber? Okay, so Mediavine is definitely going to be at conferences throughout this entire year. Obviously, we just ended ours last month, but we love to be part of other conferences as well. Great places you can see us would be Everything Food, where we're the title sponsor, Haven, FinCon, BlogPause, Women in Travel Summit, and there's probably some other that I'm missing, but those are some of the major conferences we're going to. We'd love a chance to meet you guys there. So a lot of our team goes to all these different conferences, so it's probably the best chance to meet us. Oh, and Focused. Can't forget about Focus, sorry. Any other questions before I just start rambling myself here? Come on, guys. I just had a question of what push notification plugin do you recommend? We personally at Mediavine, for our own sites, The Hollywood Gossip, TV Fanatic, and Food Fanatic, use what's called OneSignal. That's one of those, it sounds too good to be true, but OneSignal offers you unlimited push notifications for free. If you're wondering why, it's the same thing that got Facebook in trouble, but it's data, right? They're doing it all for data collection at the end of the day. But really, even if you are paying for the service, they're still collecting data. So we don't necessarily stress about that. But one thing I'd recommend is OneSignal, just because of the price. It allows you to have unlimited users and pay literally $0. That's an unbelievable traffic driver for us. We got a question from Tobias. What determines the CPM for an individual ad, like an in-content mobile ad? Is there anything we can do to increase the CPM? Great question. So what's really interesting is trying to figure out in general, and this is on our side as well for the optimization, is what necessarily a DSP or the demand side partner or advertisers are looking at when they look at your site. Some of them look on an individual ad unit level, but most of them, interestingly enough, are looking at your domain as a whole, which is why one of the things we encouraged at the beginning, once we launched the desktop adhesion, for example, was to retire the leaderboard. And the reason why is because the leaderboard was dragging down performance of the site by having a lower viewability and a lower click-through rate. So really focusing on your ads that are successful and retiring the ones that aren't is one of the things that you can actually do to lift the CPMs of all of your ad units up. But for individual ad units, just really focusing on viewability is probably the most important thing. As far as other things you can do, it's really about having engaging content. If your users are engaged with your content, they're going to be engaged with the ads that are in there. So if you have an in-content mobile appearing around content that they're engaged with, they're more likely to see the ad, read the ad, click the ad. And at the end of the day, that's what advertisers want. What keeps them coming back to your site is the fact that they got an ROI, or return on their investment, for buying an ad on your page. All right. Question that came in via Messenger. If you have no choice but to use large images due to the nature of your website, such as someone who runs a camera review blog, what can we do to increase site speed in other ways? If you're absolutely forced to run large images, that looks like that came from Heather. If you're absolutely forced to run large images, one, I would definitely focus on still compression. You should be able to compress them in a non-lossy way. Google will never give you the full Pagespeed Insights score as a result, but if you do a non-lossy compression, and still I would not ever have more pixels than are needed for that particular view. If your users are going to be nuts on it, give them a little ability to view the high res, especially if you run a camera blog, and don't have that load on page load. Allow them to click to a new page just to load that. That's probably what I would do if you were forced. Question from Duncan. Do you have any real contacts to discuss Google AdSense errors to the Mediavine ads.txt? Huh. If you're trying to run Google AdSense while running Mediavine, that's definitely going to be a violation of the Mediavine contract, and that's really for our publisher's own good. There's no reason to list your stuff on AdSense, because AdSense actually buys already through Google Ad Exchange, which your site will be a member of if you're with Mediavine. So you really shouldn't be running AdSense in your ads.txt or AdSense at all on your site. There's really not a reason, because I understand that Google is going to periodically email you, and that's probably just because you have an AdSense account, and they're going to say your earnings are at a loss. That's a generic email coming from them. You can pretty much just ignore that, because you won't be running AdSense if you're with Mediavine, so there's no earnings to be lost. One of the things we have thought about doing is giving you a way in the dashboard to add your ads.txt, add your AdSense to your ads.txt, literally just to get rid of that warning. But that's really all it would do for you. It's not going to hurt your actual earnings. Oh, Duncan, what's the issue? Now that I see you in there. Probably just misunderstood you. Didn't mean to dodge it there. All right, well, we're waiting for that. Sherry would love to know how to get revenue by post so that she knows which of her content is making her the most money. Two questions. Is adding that to our dashboard on the radar, and could we request that data from you on an ad hoc basis in the meantime? Great question. I wish there was an easy solution to that one. So unfortunately, we use Google DFP, or DoubleClick for publishers, which is pretty much the main ad server used on the internet. And that ad server does not give you reporting on a per page basis. So really, we would have to come up with a very clever hack or workaround. One of the things we're focusing on is the ability to help give you health checks on an individual post level, so you know which post to really optimize. But it's not going to tell you ultimately which post is driving more revenue. So sometimes one post will generate more revenue than another post, even if they have the same number of ads, and that can be due to the content. So AdSense, along with some of our other contextual advertisers that buy on Mediavine, will buy based upon what's called intent. So if they can read something like your post is mentioning a keyword that they're trying to buy on, they're going to be more willing to spend money on that particular post. So sometimes you might have posts that produce literally twice the RPM as another post. And we understand that you unfortunately don't know that right now. So we are trying to come up with a clever hack on how to fix that down the road, doing things such as analyzing maybe just your top posts to see how those are performing. So it is somewhere on the radar, but not coming out anytime soon. One of the things we could work with you on in the meantime, if you want to be able to request that kind of information, is we could work with you on UTM codes. So one of the things you can do is similar to like when you create a Google Analytics UTM code to track a post separately in Google Analytics from, like, let's say, a Facebook campaign. We could track on UTM codes for you, because that's something we do store. you'd have to tell us ahead of time, and then we could start tracking down that UTM code. Not sure if that's the exact workaround you're looking for, but for now, individual post RPMs is unfortunately very technically challenging, but somewhere down on the radar. All right. Cameron's got a question on thoughts on social media widgets in the sidebar and how they affect page speed. In particular, the Pinterest widget or maybe like the Instagram widget. So one thing I would say with anything in your sidebar is you really have to analyze if people are clicking on it. So I know in the past, we all used to run a ton of sidebar widgets. At Mediavine, we discourage a long sidebar so that we can have a healthier sticky health check, or basically how many times sticky sidebar ad is able to refresh because the user's on the page for longer. So we want to get that user to get to that as quickly as possible. So we encourage shorter sidebars in general. So we'd encourage you to analyze, is that widget actually being used? In terms of page speed, of course, any third-party JavaScript is going to slow down your page. That would be even advertisements, right? So that's why we lazy load things here. And typically, even if it's done by Pinterest or Instagram or a big name, it's still going to involve loading up tracking pixels and images, and things are going to slow down your site. So unless that Pinterest widget is actually driving you additional Pinterest followers, and I would see the best way you could track that, I would get rid of them. I prefer to run as few third-party JavaScript as possible. Kathy's got a great question for us. What if, this is going back to the schema markup of non-human consumable food, what if a dog cookie recipe is okay for people to eat too? With the word dog alone, get me dinged. So generally when you see one of these dings, it's due to a manual action. So that means someone from Google has come to your site, not necessarily at the Google Corporation. They also use probably third parties to do this, I'm guessing. Can't imagine it's all Google employees browsing the entire web for dog-related recipes. But that's going to go past a human. So I think if it says something like human consumable like dog treats, or you're probably better at writing than me, so you come up with a better headline than that, I think Google would probably not ding you for that particular one. I just wouldn't make it a habit of marking up a ton of different dog treats on your site. All right, looks like I've got a question. Oh, all right. Since now we are coming up on the full hour, this will be the final question, and it goes to Natalie. Back to mobile in content health check. It's always yellow. I feel like I followed the steps to get in the green, but it never gets there. What else can I do? One of the things we would definitely recommend, and this is why, again, we're going to be working on per page really health checks, or a tool to help you analyze them. I would go look at your top posts. And that would be in the dashboard. We actually have a widget in the bottom that will show you this. I'd go through them individually and literally load it up on a phone. You can turn on a thing called health test equals either page speed or house ads. We can give those to you after this. But basically running that query string parameter will make sure that an ad loads everywhere that it could, even if it's just a 300 by 250 little placeholder ad. And that's going to let you see how many ads are loading on a mobile device on that post. Make sure you're browsing it on either a typical size phone as well. So like an iPhone 6 or 7 or X, or I don't know Androids that well, Pixel, I don't know. Make sure you're not browsing on like a smaller phone. So a more modern phone, and make sure you're getting a decent number of ads, because that's what your users are seeing. All right. Unfortunately, running out of time. Duncan, email us and we'll work on that. I'll make sure that that's taken care of for you, whatever the AdSense related error you're getting. That's right, Sarah. All right, thank you guys. Oh, GDPR. Oh, yeah. That was actually asking the question. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to extend for one more question just to bring up GDPR. So just to let you know, we are working with our lawyer to come up with the best solution that we can hopefully offer for all Mediavine publishers. So solving it from the ad side is not our only concern. Our concern is a lot of our publishers are tracking information without even realizing it. Running things like Google Analytics does end up collecting data on your site. And so technically there's a lot of implications of GDPR for publishers beyond just ads. And it doesn't seem right for us to only solve the ad portion. So we're working to come up with solutions that can help you guys solve GDPR for your own blogs outside of just Mediavine. So solutions are coming. I promise you before May 25th, we will have a solution in place. We're going to be offering things like Google Live or with our lawyer even has volunteered to do this. So we're going to make sure you guys know everything you need to know about GDPR in time. It's top priority here. I know we've been a little quiet on it, but the lawyers kind of make you do that, unfortunately. Probably have said too much, but we're going to be working with you guys to help solve for this. It's not something we haven't been paying attention to. All right. Thank you guys so much for attending. Next time, we'll hopefully have a fewer technical difficulties. But thank you guys all for joining and for the awesome questions. Looking forward to doing this again with you guys. And again, this will be posted on our YouTube if there's anything you missed. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.